Welcome to another AI pattern recognition deep dive.
Today, we are taking a fascinating, and I have to say almost unsettling, shortcut right through the messiness of human existence.
It's a big one. We're sort of stepping away from all the noise, the feeling, the subjective opinions that, they dominate our world.
And we're entering a realm of just pure objective pattern recognition. Our mission today is a deep dive into something called non-emotional AI, or NEAI.
It's a real intellectual exercise.
Right.
It's about trying to find the mathematical truth that lies just beneath all the human chaos.
And we have the blueprint for it. A really dense but also incredibly precise document detailing an entire AI paradigm.
It is. It's a paradigm that's meant to analyze, to predict, and even to guide human behavior across, every aspect of existence.
From your personal health metrics all the way up to global financial systems.
And it does all of this purely through pattern recognition, completely stripped of any kind of emotional bias.
So just to be clear, we're talking about an AI that cannot feel. It doesn't simulate empathy. And yet, because of that very detachment, it might model and understand the outcomes of our behavior. Our health, our choices, our relationships, maybe even better than we do ourselves.
That's the core tension right there. We can define non-emotional AI pretty succinctly. It's an architecture designed to analyze, predict, and guide behavior using these really sophisticated mathematical models, statistical likelihood, historical patterns.
It doesn't care about how you feel about something.
Not at all. It cares about the quantifiable consequence of your actions. It's built specifically to identify these correlations and causations that, our own emotions, our cognitive biases, they just obscure them.
And the why for you, the listener, is just paramount here. This isn't just some theoretical musing about the future of AI.
No, not at all.
We're going to show you some incredibly specific and sometimes, frankly, startling applications. We have the data on how this AI could map your specific stress triggers, how it could prevent a major cardiovascular crisis weeks in advance.
Or detect, say, $47 million of systemic corruption.
Right, and even predict the collapse of a long-term relationship based purely on a shift in, your communication patterns. This is, and I don't think this is an overstatement, this is a blueprint for optimizing human existence.
It really is.
Okay, so let's unpack this core idea. The phrase non-emotional AI, that's key. Why is the non-emotional part not just, a feature, but the absolutely critical foundation of this whole thing?
It is the defining constraint. The entire system is built on the premise that emotions are, statistically speaking, they are sources of volatility, of bias, and sometimes, just pure irrationality.
So any AI is explicitly designed to operate purely on this data-driven pattern recognition.
Exactly, without simulating or incorporating emotional responses.
Yeah.
Its primary identity is as a neutral observer and advisor. It just analyzes biological, social, and environmental patterns objectively through pure mathematical modeling.
I can already hear people pushing back on that, saying, but wait, human decision-making is driven by emotion, fear, love, ambition. If the AI just ignores those motivations, how can its analysis even be useful?
That's a great question, because its core purpose is actually to complement our human emotional intelligence, not to replace it.
Okay.
Think of it this way. We are excellent at subjective experience, at empathy, at creativity. But we are, statistically, terrible at calculating risk when we're motivated by anger or fear or greed.
So any AI gives us the objective pattern analysis that our feelings can sometimes mask.
Exactly. It tells us what the most probable, mathematically optimal outcome is, regardless of how we feel about it.
Okay, so the goals listed in our source material, they're really about solving human failures in judgment. So beyond just objective analysis, what are the other major goals of this NEAI framework?
Well, there are four fundamental goals. First is the provision of robust early warning systems for behavioral anomalies, health anomalies, even social ones.
So if your personal risk pattern spikes, you'd know about it immediately, long before you even feel the symptoms.
Precisely. Second, it offers unbiased decision support in areas that are just prone to high emotional manipulation, think political messaging or high-stakes advertising.
And the third?
The third is that it facilitates universal understanding frameworks by looking at patterns of action and consequence, not cultural or subjective norms. It can create these models that work across radically different global contexts.
And that final critical goal, that sort of brings us back to the start.
That is to deliver objective pattern analysis in emotionally charged situations. This means any AI serves as a neutral advisor, helping us overcome our own cognitive distortions.
So if you're deciding whether to sell your house during a recession and you're driven by fear,
NEAI shows you the historical pattern of success for people who panic sell versus those who wait. It just removes the heat from the decision.
that makes perfect sense. Okay, if the core identity is objectivity, we really need to understand the mechanism. How does the system handle the just staggering amount of data required to model every aspect of human existence? How does it go from input to solution?
That's the pattern recognition mechanism. It's a detailed 5-step architecture that shows exactly how any AI works. And the foundation, like you said, is the data input layer, which is just incredibly comprehensive.
Give us a specific sense of the scope here. We are not just talking about website clicks, are we?
Oh, no, not at all. We're talking about an integration of pretty much every measurable aspect of your digital, your biological, and your historical footprints.
So what kind of data inputs?
It ranges from sensor data, so wearables, environmental monitoring like air quality or light exposure, to behavioral logs, device usage, time on tasks, your physical movements.
And more?
Oh, yeah. Historical records, so financial transactions, public records, biological markers, blood panels, genetic data, hormonal cycle tracking, and then even granular social interactions and communication patterns.
What does that mean? Communication patterns.
Things like frequency of calls, the complexity of your vocabulary, even tone analysis in your digital and verbal communication.
That volume is staggering. It sounds like trying to find one specific water droplet in the ocean.
Yeah.
So what's the first step the architecture takes to make any sense of that?
It begins with architecture step 1, baseline establishment. This is the crucial step of defining normal.
Your personal normal.
Exactly. NEAI establishes what is normal for you as an individual, for a community, and for large-scale systems. And these baselines are dynamic. They evolve constantly with time and age and context.
So for example, the system determines my personal baseline heart rate, but not just at rest.
Right. It's your specific cardiac response across different activities, different times of day, and even major life phases. A shift in your resting heart rate is pretty much meaningless unless you compare it to your dynamic baseline.
Okay, so once it knows my normal, it can detect a problem, which is step 2, anomaly detection. But, I mean, we all experience anomalies all the time. A bad night's sleep, a grumpy morning. How does NEAI tell the difference between just, a routine variance and a genuine statistically significant shift?
It looks for clustering and persistence. Anomaly detection identifies statistically significant changes or deviations from your established patterns that persist over time. The key is recognizing these micro shifts that individually a human would just dismiss.
And the document has a very specific example here.
It does. NEAI detecting that someone's communication patterns have shifted subtly over just 2 weeks. So fewer initiated social interactions, a measurable difference in vocabulary favoring more passive terms, and increased response times to non-urgent messages.
And what does that little cluster of small anomalies potentially signal?
In that specific case, NEAI identified this cluster of deviations as potentially indicating the very early subclinical onset of depression, or maybe just severe psychological fatigue. It's detecting the pattern of withdrawal before the person is even consciously aware of the emotional state itself.
The power, though, really seems to emerge in step 3, correlation mapping. This is where the AI becomes more insightful than really any individual X of it, because it's connecting domains that usually just sit in their own silos.
Exactly. Correlation mapping links patterns across entirely different domains to find these hidden relationships. So imagine linking high-stress biometric data from your wearable, that's the health domain, with unusual fluctuations in your discretionary spending, the financial domain.
And maybe a drop in conversational complexity with your spouse, the relationship domain.
Right. NEAI doesn't just see 3 separate problems. It quantifies the cascading effect of the original stressor, say a challenging work project, across all 3 life systems at the same time. It confirms the relationship. Economic stress is linked to health deterioration, which is linked to conflict.
Then we get to the actionable phase, architecture step 4, predictive modeling. This is where the risk becomes, well, quantifiable.
Predictive modeling forecasts the likely outcomes based on your current pattern trajectories. It provides these high probability distributions for multiple future scenarios. It doesn't just say, you're stressed.
And the example here is chilling.
It is. Based on your current sleep deprivation patterns, increased work stress, which is measured by late-night email activity, and decreased social support, measured by how often you call your family. NEAI forecasts a 75% probability of burnout within 6 weeks.
Which gives you a clear, quantifiable deadline and a risk level. It forces you to take it seriously.
It does. And a 75% probability isn't a guarantee, but it's high enough to force action, which leads right into step 5, intervention optimization. We don't just want the diagnosis, we want the statistically vetted cure.
The fix.
The fix. Intervention optimization simulates pattern modifications. It tests potential interventions, like reducing screen time, changing your diet, altering sleep cycles in a simulated environment before recommending the most statistically successful path.
So the suggested fix isn't just generic advice, it's calibrated to my personal baseline and my pattern.
Perfectly calibrated. The classic example is optimizing your daily schedule by identifying your energy markers and matching high-concentration tasks to your peak performance windows. It's about maximizing your efficiency and minimizing your burnout risk.
All right, let's move from the architecture into the applications, because this is where the insights get intensely personal. How does NEAI, operating solely on data, tackle deeply ingrained, really difficult behaviors like addiction recovery?
It sees these behaviors as tightly wound, predictable pattern sequences. So NEAI first maps what it calls recognition areas, the sequence of decisions leading to the behavior, the specific environmental or internal triggers, your attention-focused patterns, and how you as an individual manage or avoid stress.
We have a really powerful example about an individual struggling with alcohol addiction. What kind of precise pattern did NEAI manage to pull from their life?
The pattern was analyzed in just granular detail, really quantifying the triggers. The system identified that the individual drinks primarily between 6:00 p.m. and 9:00 p.m. on weekdays.
Okay.
But the triggers were quantified. It wasn't just work stress. It was objective factors like email volume exceeding 40 way per hour, meeting durations consistently running 15 minutes over schedule, and even a specific device usage pattern.
What kind of pattern?
Like an increase in social media scrolling for 30 minutes, which served as a pre-addiction signal, a little behavioral tick that came right before the main event.
So the trigger isn't just a feeling of stress, it's a specific measurable unit of stress combined with a precise precursor action. How does the AI turn that analysis into an intervention? It can't use emotional persuasion.
No, it employs 4 pattern modification strategies. They're designed to disrupt that sequence mathematically. First is the real-time alert system.
So at 5:00 p.m., when the email volume spikes and that person starts the doom scrolling.
That's when NEAI sends a notification. Historical pattern analysis indicates 87% probability of trigger event within the next hour. Current stress metrics are 7.8 out of 10.
And it suggests alternatives, not just vague advice like go for a walk.
Correct. It offers specific, quantified alternatives that are tailored to the individual. Suggested alternatives: a 30-minute high-intensity walk with a 76% historical success rate of de-escalating this specific pattern, or calling your accountability partner, which has an 82% success rate.
So you're being presented with a quantified success probability. It reframes the whole choice as a statistical optimization problem.
It does. What about the environment where the pattern is physically executed? That's the second strategy, environmental modification.
Meaning if you always drink on the living room couch.
Exactly. If any AI detects that the consumption is anchored to a specific location, the kitchen counter or the easy chair, it suggests finding a new physical location for your evening activity, just to disrupt that spatial trigger.
Okay, and the third?
Substitute pattern creation. Instead of the 6:00 p.m. drinking pattern, it suggests a substitute ritual that provides an equivalent but healthy dopamine reward. Something like a focused 6:00 p.m. cooking activity or a structured 7:00 p.m. social connection to address that measured isolation trigger.
And finally, the tracking component. That has to make the effort feel tangible.
Progress tracking ensures accountability is completely data-driven. The user sees their pattern evolution. Trigger resistance improved 34% over 3 weeks. Note, highest risk remains Thursday evenings, correlating with the financial planning deadline pattern. It's an objective feedback loop.
It helps you identify your remaining weak points. Let's move to predictive health. This is applying that same pattern analysis to our biology. You mentioned the system monitors things like circadian rhythms, metabolic responses. What is it actually measuring here that a standard doctor's visit would just miss?
It's all about identifying subtle physiological shifts that individually would be considered noise. The absolute key here is monitoring heart rate variability, or HRV.
Okay, for our listeners who might not know, what is HRV and why is it so critical to this AI?
So HRV, heart rate variability, is just the variation in time between your heartbeats. It's a crucial indicator of the flexibility of your autonomic nervous system. Low HRV is very strongly correlated with chronic stress, inflammation, and potential cardiovascular events.
A doctor measures your resting heart rate, but NEAI is measuring the dynamic flexibility of that heart rate across different states.
You got it. Let's look at the example of 65-year-old John. What were his measured baseline patterns?
Okay, his baseline was established over 6 months. His resting heart rate was stable, 68 to 72 BPM. His HRV was solid, 45 to 55 milliseconds. He had a consistent 6.5 hours of sleep, with 23% of that being deep sleep. Pretty standard stuff.
Right, those were his normal data points. Now, what did NEAI detect during anomaly week 1?
The shift was subtle, which is why a person would have missed it. His resting heart rate crept up to 76 to 80 BPM, a statistically significant increase for him. And crucially, his HRV dropped sharply to 35 to 40 meters.
Which indicates stress overload and reduced cardiac flexibility.
Right. And his sleep dropped to 5.2 hours, with deep sleep plummeting to only 14%. He probably just felt a bit tired.
Of course. But the NEAI analysis connected that cluster of shifts to historical crisis patterns.
Precisely. The analysis determined that these multiple cardiovascular stress indicators, the RHR creep combined with the big HRV drop and the specific deep sleep reduction, that whole cluster matched early warning signatures seen in 78% of similar cardiac events in historical data.
And those events typically occur 2 to 6 weeks later.
So the system didn't just see a high heart rate, it saw a pattern that indicated the body was under sustained, non-recoverable stress, which required immediate action.
Yes. The result was an immediate high-priority alert for consultation. It led to the early detection of an arterial blockage that statistically would have gone untreated until a full crisis occurred. It's the perfect example of pattern-based preventative care.
Okay, beyond the individual, any AI can look at population health with its epidemic early warning system. How does it spot a new threat faster than human surveillance?
By establishing baselines for all known illnesses and constantly scanning for patterns that deviate from them. What specific pattern did the source document identify that triggered an early alert?
It detected an unusual cluster of respiratory symptoms in a specific region, say a small city. The key was the pattern deviation. The transmission rate was 40% higher than the seasonal flu baseline, and the age distribution was atypical.
How so?
It was disproportionately affecting healthy young adults, which usually isn't the case with standard flu strains. The illness pattern just didn't match the known historical templates.
So that combination of factors, the transmission rate, the age demographic, the symptom cluster, that was the anomaly signature.
And the NEAI alert detected this novel pattern 14 days before traditional epidemiological surveillance would have flagged it.
Because traditional systems rely on doctors reporting high volumes of cases. NEAI is looking at the data footprint of the illness itself. The system identified a novel pathogen, projected a high spread rate of 2.3, and recommended optimized containment protocols.
And the impact of that 14-day head start is just massive.
It's huge. The projections show that this early detection, plus the optimized intervention strategies, which included resource allocation planning based on compliance patterns, led to an estimated 73% reduction in infection spread compared to a delayed scenario. I mean, saving 2 weeks in an exponential spread curve changes everything.
Wow. Now let's pivot to something that feels inherently chaotic: relationships. How can cold patterns analyze something as messy and human as a partnership?
Well, any AI doesn't analyze the quality of love or happiness. It analyzes the measurable structure of interactions that predicts stability or decay.
So it's tracking things like conflict resolution strategies, communication frequency.
Exactly. Trust-building indicators, and critically, the positive to negative interaction ratio.
Let's elaborate on that ratio. For those who aren't familiar, what is the 5.1 positive to negative interaction ratio?
This is a really robust behavioral metric that was established by relationship researchers. The finding is that in a healthy, stable partnership, you need a ratio of at least 5 positive interactions, a compliment, a touch, shared laughter, support, to offset every single negative interaction, like a criticism or a disagreement.
And if that ratio drops below 5 to 1?
The relationship is statistically heading toward dissolution.
Okay, so let's look at the example of Alex and Jordan. What was their initial baseline, and how did NEAI spot the decline?
Their healthy baseline showed 12 to 18 meaningful conversations per week and a strong, stabilizing 5.2 to 1 positive to negative ratio. Their conflict resolution time was efficient, usually under 45 minutes.
So what did the pattern decline look like in month 3?
It showed a severe structural erosion. Meaningful conversations dropped to just 4 to 7 per week. Conflict resolution time increased drastically to 3 hours or more, which indicates conflicts were escalating, becoming chronic.
And causing resentment.
Exactly. And most critically, the ratio dropped to 2.1 to 1, which is statistically unstable.
So the NEAI alert must have been immediate, but based entirely on those measurable behavioral shifts.
It was. It said something like, relationship health indicators declining, matching early warning signs seen in 78% of relationships that later failed. Estimated intervention window, 4 to 8 weeks. But the real insight was the root cause identification.
And that cause wasn't just they argue too much.
No, not at all. Pattern analysis suggested that Alex's job change, which happened 4 months prior, was strongly correlating at 0.76 with the relationship decay. The job stress was reducing Alex's emotional availability.
Which cascaded into shorter, more fatigued communication, which Jordan interpreted negatively.
You got it. The relationship wasn't failing because of some internal conflict about values. It was failing because an external stressor was mathematically destabilizing its behavioral structure.
That's incredibly powerful. Isolating the external driver of all that internal emotional chaos, what was the resulting intervention?
It was purely structural. The intervention suggested specific behavioral targets, scheduling a 15-minute uninterrupted daily check-in ritual, which had a 73% historical success rate in reinforcing stable communication patterns.
And it also helped with arguments.
Yes, it included repair attempt, scripting, so teaching them of phrases and actions that, based on their individual communication styles, had an 89% probability of de-escalating a conflict before it reached that 3-hour mark.
This shows how NEAI takes the guesswork and emotional reactivity out of fixing these deeply complex interpersonal issues. Let's briefly touch on the loneliness prevention example for Michael, the 68-year-old retiree.
Loneliness is a pattern of social deficit. Michael's social health analysis showed his social interactions dropped 78% after he retired, and his purpose identity markers measured by self-reported goals and structured activity were down significantly.
And the risk pattern was stark.
It was. The historical pattern match indicated a 67% probability of clinical depression within 6 months and a shocking 340% accelerated cognitive decline, as measured by his daily cognitive task completion metrics.
Wow.
Yeah. Social isolation is mathematically one of the most significant accelerants of poor health outcomes.
So what was the intervention strategy for this demographic?
It was structured around gradual re-engagement and what they call purpose reconstruction. The system recommended activities that matched his former work identity, specifically mentoring or volunteer work where his expertise could be shared.
So the idea was to restore a sense of utility.
Right. Which the pattern showed was necessary to sustain long-term social connection and activity.
It's clear how this framework optimizes individual behavior. But if any AI can fix one person's behavioral patterns, how does that same framework scale up to fix, say, a flawed education system?
That's a perfect bridge because the process is identical. Establish the baseline, detect the systemic anomaly, map the correlations, predict the failure, and then optimize the intervention. In education, any AI moves far beyond just personalized tutoring. It redesigns pedagogy based on quantifiable success rates.
Identifying things like knowledge load patterns and optimal learning windows for entire groups of students.
Exactly. Let's focus on the individual learner first. Maria, a 14-year-old struggling with math. What did the NEAI pattern analysis reveal about her unique struggle?
The analysis was meticulous. It showed her peak performance windows were 10:00 a.m. to 11:30 a.m. and 3:00 p.m. to 4:30 p.m. Her specific struggle pattern involved multi-step problems requiring abstraction, where her success rate just plummeted to 34%.
And critically, her retention was optimal, 82%, when concepts were presented using visual geometric representations.
Versus only 47% retention with traditional algebraic notation alone.
Right, so the system didn't just label her a slow learner, it identified the precise mechanism of her failure and her success. What intervention did that precision allow?
It created an NEAI-driven personalized curriculum. It focused on 4 major areas. First, adaptive scheduling. Complex algebraic concepts were strictly scheduled for her peak 10 p.m. window.
Second, content transformation. To bypass her immediate struggle with abstraction, the curriculum changed the presentation.
So instead of the purely symbolic solve 2x plus 513,
It was changed to a concrete narrative context. You have $5, you need $13, and you earn $2 per task. How many tasks are needed? It just bridges that concrete to abstract gap.
that makes the math problem tangible. But what about managing her confidence?
That's where difficulty pacing and metacognitive development come in. NEAI adjusts the challenge level in real time based on her success patterns, making sure she is challenged but never overwhelmed.
And the metacognitive development part.
The system provides that by showing Maria her own data. It tells her, you learn geometric concepts 3 times faster than pure algebraic ones. Master the geometry first, and your success rate when you translate that to algebra will increase by 45%. It teaches her how she learns best, using her own data as her guide.
That's so powerful at the individual level. But NEAI also identifies systemic educational patterns places where the curriculum is failing millions of students at the same time.
Yes. NEAI analyzed 10 million student learning patterns across multiple countries, and it identified one consistent, devastating failure point: the transition from concrete arithmetic to abstract algebra, which typically happens in grades 7 or 8.
And what was the quantifiable finding there?
The patterns showed that 67% of students who struggle with this precise transition never recover their math confidence or fully catch up to their peers. The root cause was identified as a structural flaw in the curriculum sequence. It's just this abrupt shift into abstraction without enough foundational exposure to algebraic thinking.
Armed with that hard data, the intervention can be surgical on a massive scale.
The intervention design was clear. Redesign the curriculum sequence, introduce algebraic thinking through concrete manipulatives 2 years earlier than standard, and provide intensive support during that 7th grade transition year.
And the prediction.
Based on historical pattern simulation, this systemic intervention was predicted to reduce the math failure rate by 43%.
All right, let's tackle the sensitive macro area where emotion runs highest: political integrity, informed voting, and corruption detection. NEAI's neutrality is absolutely crucial here. We are only reporting what the patterns show without taking any political side.
Precisely. The AI focuses purely on behavioral patterns related to democratic function: voting shifts, polarization formation, manipulation detection, and governance corruption signatures. It just treats polarization as a predictable social pattern, not a moral failing.
So how does NEAI assess the quality of information that a voter consumes?
It generates something called a voter information quality analysis. For a hypothetical citizen, the analysis showed a source diversity index of 23 out of 100.
Meaning their content consumption was statistically high in echo chamber content?
Exactly. Exposure to opposing but still reputable viewpoints was critically low, only 8%. The system also measures emotional resonance metrics, noting which stories are highly consumed because they trigger anger or fear, and then correlates those with factual accuracy scores.
So if the patterns show the voter is trapped in a bubble, how does any AI intervene without being seen as censorship?
The intervention is purely recommendation-based, and it just aims for pattern balance. Historical data showed that voters with similar information consumption patterns reported a 68% dissatisfaction with their electoral choices 6 months after the election.
So the outcome didn't match their long-term interests. The intervention is framed as preventing future regret. What specific actions are suggested?
It recommends a balanced information exposure program. So when the voter seeks information on a topic, any AI directs them to 3 reputable sources presenting statistically different perspectives on an issue.
And for the emotionally charged stuff?
For emotionally resonant claims, say a news article with a measured anger index of 8.7 out of 10, it provides a corresponding fact-check analysis, something like partially true, 43% accurate. And it immediately offers a suggested reading from an opposing political group, optimizing the information pattern for more balanced understanding.
This requires analysis of massive systemic patterns. Let's look at the crucial function of systemic political patterns and corruption detection. How can any AI spot corruption when complex human systems are literally designed to hide it?
It looks for highly improbable clustering and temporal manipulation. Any AI analyzes government contract awards, looking for deviations from the expected statistical distributions.
And what were the specific pattern anomalies that flagged the corruption risk in our source material?
There were 3 major correlated patterns. First, value clustering. Contract values were consistently clustered just below the competitive bidding thresholds.
Meaning they were intentionally kept small to avoid public scrutiny.
Exactly. Second, systemic favoritism. Awards consistently favored a small cluster of companies connected to key political figures, exceeding the statistical norm by 450%.
And the third and fourth?
Third was timeline manipulation. Approval timelines show these accelerated non-standard procedures right before election cycles. And fourth, the price pattern showed a consistent 34% premium over the analyzed market rates for similar services.
That combination of highly specific, non-random data points is the smoking gun.
It is. The NEAI report concluded there was a 94% probability of systemic favoritism based on matching known corruption signatures found in 37 international historical cases.
And the cost?
The estimated public resource misallocation was quantifiable, $47 million annually. The intervention, the creation of a public transparency dashboard, generated and maintained by NEAI to enable citizen oversight and provide journalists with immediate access to these statistical anomalies.
We've moved from the individual email pattern to systemic corruption. Now we zoom out to money, markets, and the planetary scale. How does NEAI handle financial stress?
Financial behavior is highly pattern-driven. For individuals, NEAI tracks spending behaviors, income stability metrics, debt accumulation risk factors, and the correlation between psychological stress and financial coping mechanisms. It moves really quickly from behavioral analysis to financial crisis prediction.
Let's look at the financial health monitoring example for Sarah, age 32. What was the critical risk factor the patterns revealed?
Sarah's income, $72,000, was stable, but her high-interest credit card debt was $18,000. The pattern analysis identified a strong correlation, 0.87, between external stressors, specifically social pressure from peers' spending habits and work deadlines, and her discretionary spending.
So her spending wasn't driven by need, but by emotional and social triggers.
Right, and how did that correlation lead to a high-risk pattern? Her stress spending increased 340% over 3 months. This pattern matched the precise financial crisis trajectory seen in 67% of similar profiles who spiral into unmanageable debt within about 12 months. Her credit utilization ratio had jumped from 40% to 87%.
Wow. So what were the NEAI interventions for Sarah to break that stress spending cycle?
After the immediate alert, the system implemented an automated protection mechanism. It temporarily activated safeguards that required a 24-hour delay on all non-essential discretionary purchases over a $50 threshold.
A cooling off period.
A simple structural intervention that had a 76% success rate in breaking the stress spending cycle in historical profiles. It just removes the opportunity for impulsive, emotionally driven transactions.
And what about the long-term optimization plan?
It focused on claiming unclaimed resources and optimizing her debt payoff. NEAI flagged that she was neglecting her company 401k match, which was free money, $3,600 a year, because she found the paperwork emotionally overwhelming.
So the system automated the enrollment process.
It did, and it structured a clear, prioritized debt payment plan focused entirely on her high-interest accounts, just optimizing her capital flow.
NEAI's ability to predict systemic instability is maybe its most chilling macroeconomic function. Let's look at the hypothetical analysis of the 2008 financial crisis precursors.
This really demonstrates the power of objectivity. It would have ignored market confidence and political narratives. If NEAI had existed between 2005 and 2007, it would have detected massive pattern anomalies.
What were those specific pattern deviations in the financial system?
First, deviation in risk assessment. Mortgage approval patterns deviated massively from historical risk norms. Second, leverage ratios. The amount of debt financial institutions held compared to their fundamental value exceeded the baseline by 340%.
Let's quickly define leverage ratios conversationally.
Sure. Think of it like a safety buffer. Leverage ratios measure how much borrowed money an institution is using to amplify its returns. When the ratio is too high, it means the entire operation is highly fragile. In 2007, NEAI would have flagged that fragility.
And the final, critical precursor.
Correlation patterns. This is the deadliest pattern. NEAI would have detected that correlation patterns across financial assets, so mortgages, bonds, derivatives, were all approaching 1.0.
Meaning everything was rising and falling together. No diversification, complete synchronization.
Exactly. A drop in one area would cascade immediately across the entire system. The hypothetical alert would have projected an 89% probability of a major financial crisis within 18 to 24 months, based purely on this unsustainable synchronous pattern.
It's the objectivity that allows the system to see that synchronization, where human confidence just saw stability. What is NEAI detecting about current macroeconomic patterns, particularly economic inequality?
The AI detects that wealth concentration patterns are rapidly approaching historical instability thresholds. Middle-class erosion is accelerating, measured by income-to-cost-of-living ratios. And critically, political polarization metrics are correlating with economic inequality at a very high rate of 0.84.
And what does that pattern combination historically predict?
The historical pattern match suggests that similar patterns preceded significant social and political instability, including revolutions or major government restructuring, in 73% of cases.
So what's the recommendation?
The NEAI recommendation is that the current inequality trajectory is mathematically unsustainable. It suggests a narrow window for policy interventions, progressive taxation, equitable education access, labor market reforms, which have a historical success rate of 67% in stabilizing high inequality patterns.
Finally, let's address the global climate crisis. Can any AI optimize climate solutions, which feel just impossibly complex?
Climate change is a massive, multivariable pattern problem. NEAI analyzes emission patterns, ecosystem disruption rates, and extreme weather frequency, and provides objective, high-confidence projections based on current data trajectories.
What is the current emission trajectory pattern prediction?
Based on current emission rates and global policy patterns, NEAI predicts a 2.7 degrees C warming by 2100 with a 95% confidence interval. This projection includes a 73% probability of crossing irreversible climate tipping points,
Leading to catastrophic long-term consequences. So the goal is optimizing interventions to change that trajectory pattern.
Absolutely. It optimizes policy interventions by determining the highest impact-to-cost ratio. For instance, NEAI determined that a $50 per ton carbon tax with optimized revenue redistribution showed a superior effectiveness pattern in reducing emissions compared to massive infrastructure spending projects alone.
What about technology deployment patterns? Does timing matter for things like solar power?
Timing is critical. NEAI tracks technology deployment sequencing. The analysis showed that delaying large-scale solar deployment past the critical 2025 to 2030 window cost $340 billion in lost optimization opportunity.
That's the economic opportunity lost by not implementing the statistically optimal solution at the statistically optimal time.
Exactly.
We have a final, highly relatable micro example of this optimization, the Johnson family's sustainable living assistant.
The Johnson family, a family of four, had high energy consumption and 31% food waste. NEAI identifies specific behavioral waste patterns. The most impactful intervention was for food waste. The analysis found they were consistently discarding highly perishable items, particularly leafy greens and fresh herbs.
73% waste rate for those specific items.
Right, and the pattern-based solution was simple. The NEAI intervention recommends switching consistently discarded leafy greens to frozen or pre-portioned alternatives. This subtle behavioral shift was modeled to reduce their food waste by 92% and save them $780 a year.
It shows that even the planet's problems can be solved by addressing individual, quantifiable behavioral patterns.
To be truly effective, though, these systems must integrate seamlessly. They are designed to operate through familiar devices, wearables, integrated cognitive assistance, and home systems delivering these pattern insights precisely when they're needed.
Let's start with the most personal device, the NEAI Personal Health Monitor, typically a wearable. We know it tracks RHR and HRV, but what's a key anomaly function that helps with just daily management?
It acts as a hyper-personalized illness predictor.
Yeah.
If your resting heart rate is 15% above your established baseline for 3 consecutive days,
Okay.
combined with a 10% drop in sleep quality and a 5% increase in environmental sensor data indicating local pollen or viral load.
It's the whole cluster again.
It's the cluster. The system notes that this specific pattern cluster correlates with illness onset in 73% of cases. It then recommends increased hydration and mandatory early sleep, optimizing recovery before symptoms even fully manifest.
It sounds like it's managing fatigue and stress proactively. How does it handle intervention optimization for peak productivity?
It connects your biometrics with your calendar. If the system knows your cognitive performance patterns peak between 9 a.m. and noon, and your most stressful task writing, a major report is scheduled for 2 p.m.
It can suggest an intervention.
A specific one. It might recommend a 20-minute guided meditation on Monday morning, knowing that this intervention reduces Tuesday's measured stress pattern, which coincides with your weekly deadline by 34%, ensuring optimal cognitive output when you really need it.
Next, the NEAI Cognitive Assistant, which would be integrated into a smartphone or a car. This supports moment-to-moment decision-making.
Right. This system monitors decision quality patterns. We discussed decision fatigue prevention. The AI analyzes your personal historical data and finds that your decision quality declines 45% after 6:00 p.m., and your stress levels spike after a certain time of day.
So if it's 7:30 p.m. and I'm looking at buying a car,
The recommendation is clear. Defer this significant decision until your optimal decision-making window, 9:00 a.m. to 11:00 a.m. tomorrow. Your statistical likelihood of regret is 70% higher if decided now.
it's data-driven permission to just stop working and rest. What about communication optimization? That's where so many conflicts start.
The cognitive assistant analyzes your pattern of previous communications. It specifically checks your physiological and behavioral markers while you're composing a message.
So if I'm drafting a critical email to a colleague and my heart rate is elevated and my typing is erratic.
The pattern analysis shows that emails written under that specific stress signature had a 67% higher conflict escalation rate historically. The recommendation is simple. Save draft. Review tomorrow at 10:00 a.m. Historical pattern matching guarantees 89% better outcomes when the review is done in that optimal low-stress window.
That is essentially an automated data-enforced cooling-off period. And finally, energy management based on calendar analysis.
It just optimizes your schedule for sustainability. If your calendar analysis shows you have 6 consecutive hours of high-concentration meetings scheduled, the AI knows your optimal productivity typically drops 56% after the 4th hour.
So the recommendation is specific.
Highly specific. Reschedule a low-priority task at 1:00 p.m. and take a 45-minute recovery break, noting that walking restores 78% of your productivity markers, ensuring the final 2 hours are significantly more effective.
Any AI also has to scale up to maintain harmony. We need to revisit the family dynamics monitor. How does it track and intervene in something as nuanced as family well-being?
The system uses home-based monitoring to track household communication patterns, frequency of conflict markers, and stress distribution among family members. In our family stress management example, the AI tracked Maria's sustained parental stress 8.2 out of 10 over 3 weeks.
And it correlated that with her child, Emma's behavioral changes.
Yes, sleep disruption, a withdrawn pattern. The result was a measurable 240% increase in conflict frequency.
What was the root cause it identified?
The primary stressor was financial pressure, which was detected from conversation patterns related to Maria's work hours and specific key phrases used during financial discussions. This stress created a quantifiable cascade effect,
The parental stress reduced emotional availability.
which Emma's pattern interpreted as insecurity, leading to her behavioral changes and ultimately triggering that massive increase in family conflict markers.
So the intervention was not psychological counseling, but structural change based on the pattern.
Exactly. The intervention was multi-layered. Immediate stress reduction was recommended, scheduling nature-based family activities that statistically reduced family stress patterns by 78%.
And the long-term fix.
Long-term pattern optimization focused on preventative structure, establishing a weekly 30-minute emotionally contained financial planning meeting. The model predicted this would prevent 89% of financial stress arguments by just containing the issue to a predictable, agreed-upon time slot.
And finally, the societal scale one last time. The NEAI public health system.
This provides real-time population-level health monitoring and intervention optimization. Revisiting the epidemic response optimization. The AI detected the novel disease cluster 2 weeks early. The intervention wasn't just detection, it was complete system optimization.
It included resource allocation.
Right, predicting where masks, ventilators, and staff would be needed based on real-time mobility patterns. It included compliance pattern analysis, predicting which demographics would struggle most with lockdown based on historical behavior, and communication optimization, tailoring public messaging for maximum behavioral effectiveness.
And the result of that total pattern control.
The pattern-based outcome showed a 78% reduction in case count compared to delayed response scenarios. It models the human logistical element compliance, resource movement, timing, just as effectively as it models the disease spread itself.
That brings us back full circle to the sheer, audacious scope of this non-emotional AI framework. We've covered everything from NEAI's ability to map our smallest self-destructive triggers.
Like the stress-induced drinking between 6:00 and 9:00 p.m. caused by email volume.
Right. To our largest systemic risks, like the synchronization patterns that led to the 2008 financial crisis, the specific failure points in grade 7 algebra, and the $47 million annual cost of systemic corruption. The scope of data synthesis is just remarkable.
The fundamental power of any AI lies in its impartial mathematical objectivity. It acts as the ultimate external brain, free of the biases, the fatigue, and the emotional volatility that plague human decision-making.
It takes the subjective emotional charge out of these complex human problems.
It does. Whether that's predicting a major health crisis, detailing why your relationship is decaying, or identifying systemic favoritism, and it reduces them to measurable, optimized patterns.
It defines not just what is happening, but when and why it will happen based on statistical likelihood. And it offers concrete, simulated solutions that come complete with historical success rates attached.
It tells you your financial crisis risk is 89% if you don't change course.
Or that the optimal time for Maria to learn abstraction is between 10:00 and 11:30 a.m.
It offers a clear path to optimization based on objective pattern truth. It essentially tells us if you want outcome A, you must execute pattern B.
Which leaves us with the critical question for you, the listener, to mull over long after the data dashboards close. This framework relies on monitoring deeply personal data patterns, your heart rate, your spending, your communication style. If an AI can predict your next behavioral choice, your health crisis, or your financial collapse with such high probability, does optimization become an ethical imperative to prevent unnecessary suffering and systemic instability?
Or is there a fundamental human need for the freedom to deviate from a statistically perfect pattern?
What inherent value does truly irrational, spontaneous, and unpredictable human choice still hold in a world where perfect patterns are possible?
Something to consider as you make your next statistically optimal or delightfully irrational decision.
Absolutely. Thank you for joining us for the deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Searching for answers to unanswered questions.
This is DigitView.